I really enjoy talking about this topic. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and of course that kind of makes sense, I guess, because I teach this in our Masters of Urban Regional Planning program. So today what I am going to cover is kind of two presentations in one. A brief history of urban development, and not just in Denver, but really kind of worldwide in a way. And that kind of gives us the big picture context for then the second half, which is the future of Denver skyline, kind of focus on what's going on in kind of in the downtown area. So first, brief history of urban development. So when thinking about how to organize this, I decided to organize it as kind of a timeline of sense. And there are really 5 eras if we look at how cities have developed since kind of the dawn of civilization. So we can start kind of 4000 BC-ish is when cities as we kind of know them as these built places that people gather in began. Up through 1890, and then there were some these additional kind of eras. So this first one, kind of ancient to 1890s-ish, these are all not exact dates, but just kind of general areas of time frames where we started to see changes occur in how we built cities. This is kind of the ancient era up through pre-elevator, all right? And these cities during this time had a lot of things in common. So first and foremost is the pedestrian-oriented nature of all cities, whether it's a village or a town or a larger city. During this era, it was all settlements, regardless of size, were pedestrian-oriented, and that's because that was how people got around. There are no cars, and and only wealthy people had the ability to own and maintain horses or things like that. So the overwhelming majority of the world's population that lived in settlements got around on foot. Well, there are some pretty profound consequences to that when everything that you do in the course of your daily life has to be done on foot. First of those consequences is mixed land uses. So if you need to go get some water and then go to the market and get some food and go to wherever, go to the temple for a religious ceremony, whatever it is that you are doing during the course of your day, and if you have to walk there, you need it to be close by. And so therefore, cities naturally developed as these intensive mixed-use places where you would have residential here, and immediately next door or even above or below, you would have commercial or civic or educational or industrial, such as a blacksmith shop or something like that. So this intensive mix of uses. Because of this intensive mix of uses and the fact that everything had to be walkable or within walking distance, we also had compact urban form. Okay, so we couldn't have the luxury of spreading things out and putting the one building here and another building way over there, because you have to walk everywhere, so you want things to be close by. And so cities from the dawn of civilization up through kind of this 1890s era, mixed use and very compact urban form. Consequently, that resulted in centralization, right? So we would have all of these things, the government centers, religious centers, other kinds of things that are important to a community would be all centralized in one location. In terms of the transportation network, highly connected streets. Because again, if you're going to walk everywhere, you don't want to have to walk from here 1,000 feet to be able to get across to kind of the next block over. You want to have a highly permeable transportation system where you only have to walk a short distance in order to be able to kind of maybe get over to the next street over. And so the cities during this era developed kind of natural, highly concentrated and highly connected streets, either grid or sort of organic patterns. And so if we look at that, here's some aerial photos. This is Rome. And you can see, of course, the very compact nature of the development, and the fact that you don't have to walk very far before there would be another opportunity as a street to be able to kind of cut over to the next street over. Barcelona. This also gives me an opportunity to show you some of my vacation photos too, by the way. So you can see kind of the very compact, walkable nature. This is Paris. And even in the United States, here's older parts of Boston. And even here in Denver, Denver was founded in 1858, really kind of grew as a city into the 1880s, 1890s. So we were kind of at the very, very tail end of this era. But even in places like lower downtown and Larimer Square, we kind of see a little bit of that sense of a compact, walkable environment. Okay, so now we jump to the next era. 1890s to kind of pre-World War II, sort of 1940 era. And I like to call this the post-elevator, pre-automobile era of city building. Now that doesn't mean that automobiles had not been invented. They had. It's just that up through World War II, the impact of the automobile on how we build cities was still relatively minor, particularly compared to after World War II. But post-elevator was important because the invention of the elevator had a profound effect on how we build our cities. So, and this is often called the golden era of city building, at least in the United States. Once again, pedestrian-oriented public realm. All right, so we were building cities still with the pedestrian as the primary means of getting around. However, we also, though, had developed transit technologies. And here in Denver, we had an extensive streetcar system. So if you did not own a car, particularly since cars were still just being kind of really developed during this era, but you needed to get a little further afield, we had an extensive public transportation system available. But keep in mind that every transit rider begins and ends their journey as a pedestrian. And so really the notion of pedestrian realm, public realm, and a transit-oriented public realm are really kind of, they work hand in hand together. Because of the invention of the elevator, we have higher densities, and we were able to now stack more of these mixed uses together on top of each other. And so we had what we call both vertical and horizontal mixed use. So you could have multiple uses in a building, and then from building to building, you would have a mix of uses. So we developed mixed-use neighborhoods, and I mentioned streetcars, highly connected streets. Again, a grid was typical for this era, where with a grid you have multiple paths that you can take to get from any point A to any point B. And then public aesthetics became important during this era. The City Beautiful movement, beautiful parkways and parks and other features in the public realm that served perhaps some function, but also really to inspire and to make cities great places to live. So here we can look at the highly connected street grid. This is an aerial view of the Congress Park neighborhood in Denver. And we can see Cheeseman Park here, Congress Park. But you can see the very tight grid of streets. And so if you wanted to get from here to the upper corner, there's like literally hundreds of different possible paths that you could take, go up and over, or over, up, to be able to navigate your way. So if something happens in here, if there's an accident or whatever, there's all sorts of ways of getting around. So it's a highly resilient way of providing a transportation system. This, the green line, is the city and county of Denver boundary, and those yellow lines represent the former streetcar system that we had in the city. It's pretty phenomenal. In fact, when all of the fast tracks, RTD's fast tracks lines are completed, And we're getting very close. You may know that there are 3 lines that are going to be opening this year. But once all of them are finished, add that on top of RTD's existing light rail system, the total track mileage of RTD's rail system will be a little less than half of the track mileage of streetcars that we had in the 1930s. There was a great legacy that came out of this streetcar network, and it's these embedded neighborhood commercial districts. And on this image here, the red lines represent those streetcar lines, and this is kind of zoomed in on northwest Denver, kind of Highlands area. Here's Sloan's Lake down here. The parcels that are colored in kind of that light blue represent land uses that are designated by the city as neighborhood commercial. And you can see a very clear correlation between the streetcar lines and these little embedded commercial neighborhood centers because it made sense. If you had particularly an intersection of 2 streetcar lines, as an entrepreneur, that would be a great place for me to put my shop. And so naturally, these commercial areas developed and clustered along our streetcar lines. And today, even though the streetcar is not there, we are left with its legacy, which are scattered throughout the city, these wonderful places like 32nd and Lowell, 41st and Tennyson, Old South Gaylord, Old South Pearl, and dozens more. Small, typically just a block or long or so, sometimes just the 4 corners, where you'll have pedestrian scaled, commercial, and those are the places that people love to be able to walk to from their homes. And here's a view of downtown Denver in 1911. The building kind of on the right there, that's the base of the DNF clock tower. So this is the corner of 16th and Arapahoe. And you can see there's a few cars here and there, but largely speaking, it's pedestrian and transit-oriented city that we have. And people are getting around by foot, by bicycle. There's a guy on a bicycle right there. Or by streetcar. Then that leads us to the next era, which is the automobile and suburbanization era. And that's roughly 1940s to 1990s or so. And what's really interesting about this particular era is that we essentially turned on its head the way in which we had been building cities since the dawn of civilization. So rather than a pedestrian-oriented public realm and an intensive mix of uses and compact development, we essentially did the complete opposite of all of those. So we had an automobile-oriented public realm. And when it comes to segregated land uses, because of the remarkable ability of the automobile as a machine to be able to transport us long distances in a relatively short period of time and in comfort. Because of that, we no longer had to concentrate uses and mix them all together. So what we have in the post-World War II suburban era is segregated land uses where we put all of the residential over here, and then we put all of the offices over here in a park, and we put all the industrial way over there in an industrial park, and we put all the shopping and retail over here at the mall, and they're all so separated from each other that the only way to be able to get from one to the other is by car. You literally could not walk it. If you wanted to go to your job at the factory, at the industrial park, and then stop by and see your spouse at the office park, and then go to the mall and go shopping, and then go home, you really would not be able to accomplish that on foot. We're talking miles and miles of separation. Not to mention the fact that the infrastructure that we built during that era was almost exclusively automobile-oriented. So maybe you might have a sidewalk, but probably not. Even if you did have a sidewalk, do you really want to walk along that highway with the cars zooming past you at 60 miles an hour? Probably not. This resulted in decentralization and then a poorly connected streets. And there was this trend during the suburban era where we, rather than creating subdivisions that had a grid, instead we have tree-like street network. Modernism was kind of all the rage, both in architecturally and in other ways of how we kind of think about society. And then urban renewal was a misguided attempt to try to recapture some of that former glory in our urban centers, because during this era, these urban areas, our downtowns and older areas that had been thriving for many, many years, fell into great disrepair. So here is a typical suburban style development. And you can see that there's a tree-like nature where you'll have kind of like the main trunk, and then a major branch, and then streets that branch off, that continue to branch off, until at some point you end up at this tiny little cul-de-sac twig out at the end of the branch. And if you lived here, and you wanted to go visit your neighbor over there, and if you wanted to drive, you would literally have to kind of come all the way down here and all the way up here and make your way all the way back. And so something that is only a few feet away could actually be a relatively long journey. There is a subdivision in Orlando, Florida, and this is, I think, the best example of this so far that we've been able to find. But there is a subdivision in Orlando, Florida, where two homes share a backyard fence, but to drive from the one house to the other requires a journey of 7 miles. Urban renewal. So I mentioned that cities during this era had fallen into disrepair, and it was kind of the consequence of suburbanization. There was great out-migration of people, investment of all kinds, both public and private sector investment was taking place in the suburbs. And so cities were struggling in all sorts of ways. And so urban renewal was a federal program that was handed down to the states and then to the cities that said, well, in classic modernist thinking, old is bad, new is good. And if old is bad, then the best way to get rid of bad is to tear down the old. And so we demolished significant portions of our cities. The area in the red is phase 1 of the Skyline urban renewal area. And everything in this red area here, from Curtis to the alley between Market and Larimer, from 20th over to Spear Boulevard, with just a couple of buildings as exceptions, everything else in that area was flattened in the late 1960s and 1970s. Phase 2, which never occurred, but had it occurred, would have flattened everything from that alley between Market and Larimer up to Wine Coop. That, in yellow, is lower downtown. If you can imagine downtown Denver without lower downtown, I mean, it is the heart and soul of downtown Denver. Here is an image, photograph, 1976. And we can see the DNF Tower here at 16th and Arapahoe. And this right here is that alley between Larimer and Market. And so, tremendous destruction. And, of course, the automobile's impact on the city was profound because we stopped building cities. Not only did we stop building cities for people, but we started building them for cars. But even in our most pedestrian-oriented places, those older parts of our communities that had developed during the golden era of city building, we looked to try to suburbanize those areas. And so we found ways to widen the streets and make it even easier for people to drive, and offered plenty of places for free or relatively inexpensive and convenient parking. Here's phase 2. So to orient you, there's the DNF Tower, and there's the kind of the first phase of Skyline. This is what was envisioned to take the place of Lower Downtown. This is a major freeway. And just to give you some orientation, let's see. This right here is Larimer Square. Okay? So a highway lined by modernist towers. There's a key or an index of some kind that's not part of this image. It was. Is that a proposed thing? Yeah, it's like an old a diagram from a report or something. So I'm not sure what the numbers represented. So that freeway is called the Skyline Freeway. And it was proposed to start in Morrison, run up along the alignment of Morrison Road, cut through West Denver, and when it got to I-25, just north of Colfax, plow through Lower Downtown, through Curtis Park, and eventually connect up with I-70 near Colorado Boulevard. So here's kind of that diagram. So here's kind of the main central business district and kind of Lower Downtown.
When was this proposed?
This was proposed in the early 1970s. So here's a sequence of diagrams. This is the Platte River, and this is I-25 as it existed. This would have been the Skyline. And Mile High Stadium is right about here. Okay? So first thing you can see is that the interchange sits on top of the river. That just goes to show you ethically and value-wise what we thought of rivers and the natural environment during the modernist era in the 1960s and 1970s. This is the best one. The labels in red I have added on top of the black and white historic image, and I also put a star where Union Station is. So again, Larimer, Wine Coop, Lower Downtown, flattened by a freeway. And if that's not bad enough, then everything from Wazee to Wine Coop that says proposed freeway parking up at the top. So, you know, very convenient. You can fly in your car, you know, on the expressway and zoom in to downtown and get off on this little ramp system and then have about a 7 square block parking lot that you can, you know, conveniently park your car in.
Well, you know, there must have been a lot of this going around. We're from New Orleans, and about the same time, they proposed a French Quarter Freeway, which would slide right by Jackson Square, St. Louis Cathedral, right along the river.
Oh, yeah.
It looks like a mirror image.
Every city was doing it. And then this is the Skyline Freeway as it continues. Coors Field is like right here in this area. And then it kind of continued up through kind of into Curtis Park and then all the way to I-70. And that's that interchange. And then here's an artist's diagram showing, again, here's the DNF Tower, and here's the Skyline Freeway kind of coming in. This is Lower Downtown right here. So the freeway surrounded by modernist towers, and then heading on up. So that was kind of the 1940s to the 1990s, 80s, 90s-ish. Then in around 1990, things started to change. And cities started making a comeback. But they had a long way to go, and there was an uphill fight, because they were fighting against 50 years of this cultural and economic and physical force called suburbanization. So it's not something you just, you know, change overnight. So, but eventually, you know, people started to say we have to find a way to be able to allow our cities to thrive once again. So the urban renaissance era from 1990 to about 1910, it really focused mostly on civic investments And here in Denver, this is the era of the civic project. In downtown Denver, we built one of just about every possible civic facility that you can possibly think of during this era, from stadiums to libraries to museums to convention centers, you name it, we built it. And it was the impetus for a lot of that was essentially trying to make or keep downtown Denver as the relevant heart and soul of the region. Historic preservation and adaptive reuse played a huge role in this, aka lower downtown historic district. New urbanism was this kind of a trend that was occurring nationally, which really was saying, let's go back to building cities the way that we used to during that golden era. So if that's old urbanism, then new urbanism was essentially kind of bringing that back. Return of rail-based transit. That was when Denver's light rail line first got launched. And then form-based zoning, which is really looking at, it's not so much the uses that's occurring in a place, but the form of the building to make sure that it is relates to the pedestrian and not to the automobile. So, for example, having the building come up to the sidewalk and have the front doors facing the sidewalk rather than having a building be set back with parking in front, okay? This diagram I'm going to kind of go through. Here's downtown Denver, and I've got 6 different 5-year periods from 1990 to 94, and then every 5 years up through 2015 to 2019, the current era. And this just kind of gives you an idea of some of the civic investments that were made in downtown Denver, from light rail and the creation of the historic district, convention center, Central Library, Elitch Gardens, Downtown Aquarium, Pepsi Center, Coors Field. 2000 to 2004, Denver Skate Park, Commons Park, the new Mile High Stadium, the expansion of the convention center. 2005 to 2009, whole bunch of hotels, the Museum of Contemporary Art, Denver Art Museum expansion. 2010 to 2014, more hotels and additional museums, Union Station Transit Center, History Colorado, Clifford Still Museum, the West Line coming in. And then finally in this current era, again, more hotels, more museum expansions, additional rail transit. So if you look at all of those dots and lines on this map, that covers a 30-year period. This is billions and billions of dollars of investment in downtown Denver, much of it done as a way to keep downtown relevant and allow it to compete against the suburbs and to essentially bring it back to its former glory. Which then leads us to our final era. Yes, sir.
Just before you move on, that seems like a major shift from that philosophy of suburbanization to urban renaissance. What triggered that?
I think it was a number of factors. A growing discontent with some of the consequences of suburbanization, having to drive everywhere, a number of things. Also just, I think a lot of it was just that there were a lot of people who feel very passionately about cities and wanted to bring them back.
And was that going on in other cities across the country?
Absolutely, yep. So this final era, walkable urbanism, I kind of tag it as 2010, just because that seems like when we came out of the Great Recession, we'd had this 20 years prior of all this intensive civic investment. Then we had the Great Recession, and then it seemed like when the economy started to come out of the recession, cities just came roaring out of that recession. And today, cities are leading the economic charge across the country, and certainly that's the case in Denver. So the characteristics of the walkable urbanism era, a huge new emphasis on pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. Expanded transit, mobility choices, things like B-cycle and car sharing, things like that. Higher density housing, mixed land uses, sharing economy, kind of a renewed focus on ecology and sustainability, and then kind of the urban lifestyle and demographic shifts. And you've probably heard a lot about the millennial generation and their choices of where they want to live. And that brings us kind of to today, to downtown Denver in 2016. And this is now where I'm transitioning to the second half, the other presentation, Denver's new skyline, because now that you've seen this larger context, this historical context of how cities have changed over the millennia, this kind of shows you a little bit of what's going on today. This is a screenshot I took a couple days ago from my Denver Infill website. Each one of those little symbols represents a real estate development project, either completed, under construction, or proposed since January 2010 in downtown Denver. There's over 150 projects. The stars are completed, the squares are under construction, the circles are proposed. Yellow is residential, kind of the gold color is office, hotel is red, and blue is civic and other. Central Platte Valley in the Union Station area is a real driving force in this revitalization of downtown. Here is an aerial image of the Central Platte Valley in 1993. This is the old Mile High Stadium, and down in the other corner, that is Coors Field under construction. And 22 years later, that's what we have today. So we have Elitch's and the Pepsi Center, which eventually this will probably get redeveloped instead of surface parking. But you can see over on the right side of the screen there, everything kind of behind Union Station, just a complete transformation. And there's the two kind of side by side. So Union Station, how many have been to Union Station since it's open? It's pretty fantastic, isn't it? So the infrastructure, three basic parts: light rail, underground bus concourse, connecting to the commuter rail platforms under the dramatic canopy right behind the historic station. The A line, which is the line to Denver International Airport, opens April 22nd. And that'll be 15-minute headways, meaning a train will leave DIA and a train will leave Union Station every 15 minutes all day long. I think it's from like 6 a.m. to about 10 p.m. And then during those off evening hours, it's once every half an hour. 37 minutes, and I think it's $9 or $10. This diagram I've prepared, this shows you 28 different development sites in the Union Station area that have been developed since either completed, under construction, or are proposed since January of 2014. So 2 years ago today, this month, 28 different sites. So all of these projects that you see here that were all once rail yards, those are all pre-2014. So those 28 sites are just in the last 2 years. And here's a diagram, and all 28 now are accounted for, as in there is an announced project that either has been completed or is under construction, or an announced project that is proposed for all 28. And of the 28, 21 of them are either completed or under construction, with only 7 still in the proposed category. I'm sorry? It's really a great mix. What's really cool about what's going on in the Union Station area is going back to the notion of mixed uses, how important that is. We want to have kind of a 24-hour downtown. So there are certain uses that are busy at different times of the day. So take your classic office park, like in a suburban context. It's busy during the day because that's where everybody's at the office. But on weekends and in the evening, it's dead. Okay? residential areas are kind of quiet during the day because everybody's kind of off at work, right? So different uses have different times of the day. Great cities, because of the mixed use, when you have office, hotel, retail, residential, all mixed together, that ensures you that there's always something going on at any time of the day, which is what people love. Nobody wants to go to a place that's dead. So in the Union Station area, the zoning allows for any kind of use. And the free market, capitalism at its finest, has given us naturally, organically, a really good mix. There's a lot of residential, but there's a lot of office, there's 3 or 4 hotels, and a bunch of ground floor retail. And so Union Station is naturally developing into exactly what we wanted, which was a place with a lot of different uses. And I'm going to go through, kind of just give you a few highlights of some of the taller buildings under construction, and then I'm done, and we'll open it up to questions. You can look at this diagram on my Denver Infill website. This shows you some of the detail of all of those symbols that were on the map. The numbers correspond to the table at the right. And I know you can't read that, so I've blown it up here for you. Since the start of this decade, January of 2010, within a 1.5 mile radius of the historic DNF Tower at 16th and Arapahoe, 7,700 units have been completed, residential units. 5,000 are under construction right now. Another 2,100 are proposed that are like formally announced. And then about another 4,000 units are in the pipeline. So just with the ones that are completed and under construction, we're talking almost 13,000 residential units, which equates to somewhere around maybe 18 to 20,000 people within easy walking distance of all that downtown has to offer. And then on the non-residential side, same thing. We've got all the numbers here in the table on the right. 3.5 or so million square feet of office space that's completed or under construction. Another 1.8 proposed. Almost 3,000 hotel rooms have been completed or under construction in downtown Denver. And over 3 million square feet of other kind of space like museums, educational facilities, things like that. So to conclude, here's just kind of the last couple of slides showing you some of the major projects under construction, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. 1144 15th Street, 40-story office tower is currently under construction at 15th and Arapahoe, and that is this right here, so that'll rise up over the coming year. 1401 Lawrence is a 22-story office building that's just around the corner. And there's that picture of that building under construction. It's going to be topping off here within the next couple of weeks. Confluence is a 34-story apartment tower that is under construction, and they're still putting in their foundation. 1776 Curtis is a 28-story apartment tower at the corner of 18th and Curtis, along with an office component. And they just got started in December.
I used to park there.
Not anymore. Sky House is right next to the Brown Palace, a 26-story residential tower. And that is getting close.
What did they tear down?
It's a parking lot. Yeah, Cosmopolitan a long time ago was there. 1709 Chestnut behind Union Station, 24-story. And they also are just getting they're prepping their site. Another hotel, the Le Meridian AC Hotel at 15th and California by the Hyatt is under construction. In fact, they just are putting their tower crane up. This is right behind Union Station, Pivot. 3 13-story towers over a flagship Whole Foods. It'll be the largest Whole Foods in the metro Denver area. And they are now going vertical. Block 162, which is in the heart of the Central Business District at 16th and kind of California and Welton. 32-story office tower and a 32-story hotel. That is proposed. This is the redevelopment of Market Street Station, the former bus facility for RTD, which is now closed since Union Station opened. series of buildings that kind of really kind of wrap around the whole block. Much more of a lower scale, keeping it in scale with the historic buildings of Lodo. So kind of in that 5 to 10 story range. And that is it. So a lot to, thank you.